guys? Welcome to another Brand Doctor podcast. Today I have an amazing guest, super cool dude. Met him on Instagram. Didn't realize he didn't live too far from me. So he's a fellow Jersey native, and he's got an amazing podcast called the Trendsetters Podcast. I want you guys to go check that out as soon as you get done listening to this show. But the reason why I had my next guest on the show is because I was very inspired and actually motivated by this guy's drive. He's a young buck. He's only maybe a sophomore in college, and he has outperformed a lot of my colleagues who are my age. And I want to kind of bring him on the show and have him share his story. And I'm going to talk to him about how he got that motivation and drive to begin with at such a young age. And we'll see where the conversation goes. So without further ado, I want to introduce Jesse K to the show. What is going on?
Thanks so much for having me on. I'm excited to do this, and especially considering that you're a fellow Jersey guy, it makes it even better.
I love it. I love it. I love it. So for those folks who do not know who Jesse K is, I want to kind of take it back to the roots, and then we'll build it up from there. And I'll stop you and ask any questions that I find relevant. But tell us your story, dude.
Yeah, totally. So you gave me a pretty good intro. You didn't miss too much. But going a little more in depth, I guess I've always been into business since I was a little kid. My dad's also an entrepreneur, so I sort of got some of the work ethic and the whole theme of wanting to be in business from him. I started my first quote-unquote business when I was 9, I think, flipping shoes on eBay. And I made, I don't know, a couple $1,000s, but for a 9-year-old, I thought I was like a millionaire.
Sure.
So that was a lot of fun. And it sort of progressed to, I did a bunch of random business stuff, but nothing really focused until junior year of high school. I was sitting in an entrepreneurship class, which I thought was total BS, by the way. I was like, you can't learn entrepreneurship. Like, how does that work? From a teacher that just was in school. Like, I was like, I can't learn this. But actually, our project for the year was writing a business plan, which once again, I thought was BS. I was like, this is interesting. But so we sit down and write it, and I realized all the kids in my class were super entrepreneurial and had great ideas, but nobody knew how to execute their ideas. They're like, here's my idea, now what? So I thought, hey, why don't I go interview people that have done it and see what they did? So I went out to try and interview young people, young founders, young athletes that reached the top of their industry. Obviously, who's going to say yes to a random 16-year-old kid that has no listeners? So I just sent a bunch of cold emails. I sent like 300 cold emails a day, and that led to getting people from Gary Vaynerchuk to Jack Dorsey, who started Twitter and Square, Adam Schefter, a whole bunch of different people on the podcast. And then quickly did an internship with Brandon Steiner from Steiner Sports, which is like one of the world's biggest sports memorabilia companies. They actually recently got acquired by Fanatics, who was another client of mine. But Steiner, I worked with Brandon every day senior year of high school. I left at 11 a.m. from class, just stayed in his office. We were the last two to leave the office. I'd sometimes go back to his house and do more work. Learned a ton from him. And then from that, it sort of spurred off into starting my own business where I have a company that works with different pro athletes, teams, and then some businesses on their whole digital and social media platforms.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I love it. So I got to ask, what was that pitch in those 300 to 400 emails a day? What did that sound like?
I started off super long with, hey, I'm Jesse. Here's all my info. And then I realized, like, these guys aren't going to read a page-long email. Like, they're busy guys to begin with. So I really changed it to the biggest thing I did was I changed my subject line. When I had my subject line just say podcast interview, I think my open rate was like, I don't know, 10%. When I put 16-year-old podcast interview, it was like 95% open rates.
Wow.
And I really just pitched them, hey, my name is Jesse. I'm a huge fan of your work. I'm inspired by your work. I think my audience will be too. I have an audience of young entrepreneurs, and could I have 5 minutes of your time? And then I'd talk to them for 5 minutes, and most of the time they'd be like, sure, I'd be happy to come on for 20 minutes. It was just getting them on the phone to begin with.
Sure.
And once I did that, I did a pretty good job at closing them out. And then I just had them on. And then as the audience grew, I grew the audience by just leveraging their audiences because I didn't have any audience at that point.
Yeah. Smart move, dude. So a couple takeaways there that I want my audience to get. One is keep it short. These busy entrepreneurs and successful people, they don't have the time to read a novel.
No.
The second thing is make it about them. Like, make it about them. Like, I have an audience that, and I love how you said fan of your work, but I have an audience that would love to hear your story, love to hear, or, one of the things that my mentor always said to get better names on your show is to figure out what's going on in their life right now that they're really focused on and help them promote that. So I have a few people coming on the show in October that are pushing their book launches, big book launches. So I'm like, this is perfect. So you reach out and say, hey, I would love to help you push your book. Chances of them saying no to that is kind of small. So love that. So talk to me about the agency or business that you have now. So your niche is pro athletes or young entrepreneurs that are looking to build and grow their personal brand, their business.
Yeah, so it's mostly we've done work with pro athletes, and then I also like the corporate business side where we'll work with either like Fortune 500 CEOs or companies as a whole and helping them, because a lot of these guys, it really goes two ways. On the professional athlete side, it's a lot of these guys have huge followings, huge brands, but they don't really know how to monetize it on digital, and neither do their agencies. So one of our athletes that we worked with was repped by a massive agency that everyone would know. And he was like, they really just haven't been able to do anything like in the last 10 years on digital or social. Like they've been super good with everything else, but not really digital or social stuff. So we took over, we did a bunch of different deals. On the athlete side, we've done deals with Uber, TikTok, Movement Watches, a bunch of different brands on that side that we've negotiated and executed. And then on the business side, a lot of these guys want to build a presence. For example, we've worked with a guy who's a billionaire and owns a sports team, but he had no Instagram or social media presence. So we built that up to over 100,000 followers, did that. And then with businesses, help them sort of with their whole digital presence, conversions, all that kind of stuff.
Wow. So these pro athletes, right? Let's focus on these guys for a second, right? What are they looking to do? Like, why would they want to hire somebody like you? Have you figured out like what their challenges and obstacles are and what their real needs and wants are?
I think they just want to spend their time on the court, on the ice, on the field, whatever it is, and not have to worry about everything else, because these guys, they'll have millions of followers, but they don't want to waste their time trying to figure out how to engage with them and monetize them. They'd rather hand it off to somebody who does. So we could take over, grow their audience, engage their audience, find strategic partnerships to make more money or to get their name out, do collaborations with other athletes to cross over. So we worked with an athlete who was a skateboarder, and we wanted to get him more visibility with other athletes. So we did this whole project where we did collaborations with a Dodgers player. We did it with one of the top tennis players in the world. We did it with where we'd cross-post other stuff and give away different stuff, but it would get baseball players to now know who this guy is, and it was just a great way to get branding across both industries.
Ooh, I love that, dude.
Yeah,
and so,
it's fun.
When you start to build up a client base, right, and you start working with these different personalities, right, you become more valuable because you have this network and you're like, ooh, let's just say Rob Dyrdek, for example, right?
Yep.
Ooh, Rob Dyrdek has that spunky, outgoing, that personality, right? Ooh, I'm working with this guy that has a very similar characteristics. Why not connect these two?
When we were, so the pro skater that we worked with is Paul Rodriguez, who is he's on his 11th signature shoe with Nike. But we were like, let's get other visibility. So we did a thing with Jock Peterson on the Dodgers. We did something with Jack Sock, the pro tennis player. Like, it was just people that a lot of them were Nike guys too. So we reached out to a bunch of Nike guys, and it was just a cool way to get the Nike brand image across, get their personal brands across. It was a fun project for sure.
That's awesome, dude. So, these guys feel so unconnectable, right? You look at let's look at Le'Veon Bell on the Jets, for example. He's got over 1 million followers, right? His comments are blowing up on every post on Instagram. How did you connect with these athletes? How did you actually make that connection and get them in your ecosystem?
Yeah, it's funny. The whole process of getting in touch, it's like, oh my God, these guys they're not real people. And then you get in touch and it's like, they're totally normal people. Like, I've stayed at their houses. I've had dinner with them, hung out. Like, they're totally normal. It's so funny just to see the difference in your head of like, these guys are pro athletes. And to actually talk with them, they're like anybody else. But getting in touch with them, Well, it's all my entire business so far has just been referral based. So like a guy I knew, funny. So the way I got in touch with Paul Rodriguez, who was one of my first clients, definitely first pro athlete client. One of his buddies, this guy, Mikey Taylor, I had, who's another pro skater, had him on my podcast. I'd just seen him on Instagram. He was a pro skater. He's like, you should talk with my friend Paul and have him on your podcast. I'm clueless on skaters. I'm like, sure. So a lot of my clients have come from past guests on my podcast.
I got it. So I used to skate for 4.5 years when I was 6. Well, no, I'd say 12 years old to about 16. So I was young, right? So
Yeah.
what company does Paul?
So Paul owns Primitive, which is one of the bigger. They have a bunch of guys on that team, but he was with Plan B. He was with all these different brands.
Okay, so I remember Plan B. Plan B goes way back.
Yeah, he was with a bunch of those guys, and then he ended up starting he left, maybe it was Girl. He had left one of them to become, to start Primitive, which is now one of the bigger ones. He's also invested in a bunch. His dad is Paul Rodriguez, senior comedian.
Aha. Okay. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, it was so funny. I have a funny story about one of the pro athletes I met. So we were out in Edgewater, New Jersey at this place called Waterside. Then it was the spot to go on Friday nights. I mean, everybody used to go there. And one of my buddies was good friends with Jason Pierre-Paul. And so we sat down and we had dinner together and we were hanging outside. And it was so funny. Like, I remember my wife not knowing at all who he was. And like, she came up to like his hip and it was so funny. She was like, you know why I like you, Jason? And he's like, why? Looking down at her.
Yeah.
And she was like, because you're normal.
Yeah, totally.
And I think that these guys I think people get very starstruck. I think people they put these people on these pedestals, which is fine, but I'm not a huge pedestal person because when you put them on a pedestal, I feel like they have only one thing to do, and that is to look down at you. So don't put them on a pedestal, put them next to you. And, you know, what was crazy was we actually formed a little bit of a relationship with him. I mean, we're not buds by any means, but like I remember going to a sushi spot locally and he was there. And he calls us over and we sit down, we have dinner with him. And there was a bunch of us there, but he picked up the whole bill. Like he didn't have to do that. And like, he's just a normal dude. And so like, don't be afraid. Like these folks out there that are listening or watching and that are afraid to like reach out to these people, like they're human beings. So I'm so happy.
They respond to DMs. They do all normal, like reach out. What's the worst that can happen? They don't respond.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. So I see you on Instagram and you're at the ESPYs, you're here, you're there. So talk to me. How are you putting yourself in these places to really grow and build your brand?
Yeah. I mean, I've been super lucky and grateful just in the way I've been able to get around to, like, if you told me a couple of years ago, I'd be at the ESPYs doing the red carpet thing and going to the uninterrupted party with LeBron after, it would have been like, you're on drugs. No way. I think it's been a combo of doing stuff the right way with also being able to leverage the fact that I'm young and getting lucky on that side. I think it's definitely an advantage. I always joke to my friends, now it's September 16th. My birthday is August 11th. I got around 11 months to become relevant before I'm 20, because once I'm 20, nobody's going to care anymore. But no, I think it's been just trying to put myself in the best places I can and do the right thing whenever I can, be ethical, do everything to the best I can. And then really just trying to provide value to people. So have them on my podcast, do a bunch of stuff and not ask for anything back really. And then just letting things happen and saying yes to a ton of stuff. The ESPYs thing, I was supposed to speak at this thing run by ESPN the week before. And then I was like, you know what, I'll just hang around for the ESPYs, and ended up having a great week that I'm super happy I did. So it's been a combo of luck and putting myself in the right place, I think.
Yeah, dude, there's something that so I'm a big energy guy, and not to get all woo-woo on people.
Yeah,
but
go for it.
You pick out, like when we connected, like I felt an authenticity about you. Now speaking to you face to face, you know, you have this aura about you that's very welcoming. That's very like, hey man, you know, whatever. Like,
Yeah.
we can do this or we can't do this. Like, it is what it is. Like, it's like, you don't get all down and out. Like, you just have a good head on your shoulders. And I think a lot of folks that are watching and listening, like, and I think it's a lot of the younger generation where they have this mentality with like, what's the worst that can happen? Where us older folks, I'm only 39, but right? People are like, well, if I do that, that could tarnish my reputation and people are going to look at me differently. And like, we're like jaded with like all this like negative think.
And I used to be so focused on what other people thought about me. And then that all, like, I was so insecure. And it all changed when I started my podcast. People were like, what the hell is this kid doing? Like, starting what's a podcast? Like, I'm a junior in high school starting. And once that happened and I started getting people on and it turned out something, then you realize everyone wants to start talking to you and see what's going on. And really the thing I realized is like, there's a few people whose opinions about me I care about. Family, close friends, and people I respect. Everybody else, like, I really could give to whatever you think of me. Like, go for it.
Yeah. Yeah, that is so important to have. You have to have that mentality and that focus to succeed, I think, in entrepreneurship. If you're so worried about stepping on every eggshell that comes your way, you're not going to get to where you want to be.
You're always going to piss somebody off.
Always. And I feel like if you're not, you know who does this really well? I dug into his book not too long ago, Ramit Sethi.
Okay.
And he's got this book out called I Will Teach You How to Be Rich. Ramit, R-A-M-I-T, Sethi, S-E-T-H-I. Big shout out to Ramit. So the book is all about finance, right? I didn't realize that until I dug in. But the book is all about how to really look at your money and look at your finances. But let me tell you something. He is one opinionated dude. And he stands behind everything that he says. Another person, Guy Kawasaki, he was another guy. I was just listening. So I have a little morning routine. Every morning I wake up 6 o'clock, go to the gym. And while I'm in the gym at that hour, I have my earbuds in and I'm listening to a YouTube channel called Law of Attraction. And that YouTube channel is all like personal development and like motivating and that. So Guy Kawasaki comes on and he's talking about when people say I can't afford it. Like when people say, well, you know what? I can't afford it. He said, that is the laziest response I've ever heard. And he said, so he was the guy that created Rich Dad, Poor Dad. He was the one who, he founded that whole brand. And he said, I've never saw a successful entrepreneur say, I can't afford it. They're like, how can I afford it? So that just stuck in my head when he was like, those people are lazy. And like, he did not back down from that statement. And I was just like, that's so true. Like, if you really want something, you will find a way. Like, I was mowing lawns at 13. Like, and I got everything I ever wanted because I freaking worked for it. So to see somebody of your age that's just grinding and hustling and putting in the work and just doing it, it's impressive. And I want other people to see this.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been a fun ride, but definitely it's not all out of all of my friends, like the ones that actually do it, they put in so much work. It's insane.
Yeah. You have to understand that there's a certain amount of work you have to put in. Like, I put out this email today and I was talking about, so I have a 2-year-old son, right? And not too long ago, he was learning how to walk. Now the guy, he's like Mario Andretti. I mean, he's flying around the house and it's insane, right? But I remember when he was trying to walk and he was like, he would look at me and he goes, Daddy, I'm going to fall. Daddy, I'm going to fall. And I would respond, no, you're not. I got you. Daddy's got you. Don't worry about it. And I thought, wow, wait a second. I am doing him such a disservice right now by responding that way. So the next time he goes, Daddy, I'm going to fall, I'm going to say, all right, when we fall, we get back up, right? So I started to say that. So every time he would say, I'm going to fall, I'd say, okay, when we fall, we get back up. Then I waited a week. He started again. Daddy, I'm going to fall. Then my response was, well, what do we do, Dante, when we fall? And he goes, we get back up. And I'm like, there we go.
Yeah.
So yeah, you have to keep going. And I just love your drive. I don't see you slowing down 1 second. So
I hope not.
no, where are you going now? I'm curious to hear like what your plans are for 2020 and what you foresee, let's say in the next year. I hate to say 3, 4, 5 years out, because who the hell knows where we're going to be.
Yeah, I mean, on the next, so it's weird because I have my podcast, which I just relaunched. I have my business. I'm also in school. So it's been crazy. Really what happened last year is I started freshman year of college, and it was a priorities thing. It was like, I only have so much, 24 hours in a day. I need some sleep. I have business, I have podcast, I have school. I want to keep relationships. What do I focus on? And the podcast fell to the bottom rung just by default because I was trying to figure out what I was trying to do.
Right.
Luckily, I got my time management figured out where now that's important to me again. And I just came out with a bunch of new episodes and I'm excited about that. But I'd say over the next year, I want to make sure that, because it's weird, all of my best friends who were in business, none of them went to college, or if they did, they dropped out. And I just don't want to regret not doing it. I feel like you can only do that once, and I want to get the experience. But I think over the next year, I want to continue to grow my business now and also explore new business stuff. Like, this isn't what I want to do forever. I enjoy it. It's been a really fun experience and I want to continue to grow it, but I don't think I'll be doing this in 10, 15 years. I'd love to, I want to grow this and think new stuff. One of my mentors told me, like, this is the time where you can try 1,000 things. He was making, I think he had his first big business right when he had left college, but he was doing like $100 million a year in college. He's a billionaire now. It's insane. But he was like, I had 1,000 business ideas when I was your age. Like, pursue all of them and see what clicks, continue what you do now. So I want to do that. I want to continue to grow my podcast. And stay in school. The way I look at school is like, I can balance both right now. So I might as well stay in school, continue my business. And then longer term, I think continue to grow a business, continue to build my brand. Those are probably the 2 key focuses of mine for the next couple of years.
I'm so happy you said that, because with the time remaining, I want to talk about how important brand is, specifically personal brand, because this podcast really, really focuses in on personal branding and how important it is to drive revenues and build a profitable and reputable brand through you. So talk to me about some of the ways that you've created and established your personal brand, and what are some key parameters or pillars that you created around your personal brand to make it what it is?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing is personal brand for me has been huge. Without that, nobody's paying me for anything. Like, it's me and I have a couple of people, but besides that, it's like I'm nobody without that. Nobody's going to pay me for stuff if they didn't know who I was. But I think the couple of tips I'd have and sort of how I did it was I started my podcast. The podcast led to me growing my Instagram, which has been super important for me. I have 30,000 followers on there. So that's been very important for me. And then getting around and doing strategic speaking stuff. I'm not going to go, like, it doesn't make sense to jump at every speaking thing, but the stuff where there's an impact either on the audience you're reaching, or it could be a cool strategic thing. I think doing that and promoting that and pushing that out has been super important for me. Speaking at cool high-end business events and with different companies, that's been super important for me. And then just getting my stuff out, whether it be the podcast or the business, pushing that through the press, trying to get some attention on that stuff. But the key parameters I try and focus on is, like, I'm never not going to be me. I'm not going to try and frame myself to hit somebody else's image or try and position myself where I'm going to get a short-term deal, but it's going to ruin a long-term view of me. So I'd say focus on just being yourself and build it out authentically. Like, build out a proper brand. Don't try and rush it. Don't try and flood it with fake stuff. Just do it the right way.
Oh man, I love it. I love it. So I have to play devil's advocate here a little bit and ask you the question. How do you respond, Jesse, when somebody comes to you and says, well, you're 19? Like, what is a 19-year-old going to, because there's those people out there, and I'm sure you've got it, right? I'm sure you've gotten that 1,000 times already. Well, you're 19. And then, Gary had that whole spiel about not that you're a life coach, but like, what is a 23-year-old life coach going to teach me, right? So I want to go there for a second and ask you, like, when you get dealt with that objection or with that comment, how do you handle that, and what's your response?
I'd say two things. First off, look at my results. That usually shuts people up pretty quickly. Like if you show them the thing, it's like either you did it or you didn't. And then on the side of, I totally agree. 23-year-old should not be a life coach because they haven't. But for me, if I'm working mostly in digital and social, I've grown up on that. We're the first generation ever to have it in your hands I haven't touched anything else really for the past 19 years. And then, just look, if pro athletes and these other people are willing to trust me, why wouldn't you give me a shot?
There you go.
But
Wow.
also, it's important to pay attention to what you're good at and what you're not. Like, I'm not going to go when you go into a room, you need to prove that you're worth it. If you're surrounded by 40 and 50-year-old executives and you're a random 19-year-old, like you need to prove what you're valuable at. But I think staying focused on what you are valuable at and not sort of staying in your lane and not getting out of it and offering advice on other stuff is super important, because if you start offering 10,000 pieces of advice, obviously you're not that knowledgeable compared to everyone else in the room.
Well, I think people buy from specialists, especially our clients. Our clients spend the extra couple bucks. They're the premium end type of clients, and they would much rather spend their money on somebody that just focuses in on X versus having a generalist come in and try to, be the end all be all for all of their problems. I think that's the biggest problem I'm seeing with my brand accelerator clients, where they're coming in and they're trying to be everything to their audience, and then they realize they wind up being nothing. And then we have to go through the program and really strategize who it is that we want to focus on. What are their pains? What are their problems? How are we going to solve them? And how are we going to differentiate ourselves from everybody else when we go to market? And so one of the questions that I forgot to ask when we were talking about the pro athletes is, since you have quite a few pro athlete clients as of now, is there a common denominator of want or need with these folks that you've been able to kind of see, and you're like, okay, this is the hot button that these athletes are dealing with, and here's how I'm going to solve that? Have you been able to figure that out yet?
I think a lot of them just want to get involved in stuff off the court, off the field, stuff that, because everyone knows their career isn't going to last forever, 10, 15 years if you're lucky for most of these guys. So I think a lot of them try to get into business, try and build some brand partnerships now that can last a lifetime or can last long term, but then also just get involved in other business stuff and start getting your attention off the field and off the court just as much as you are on the field or on the court.
I think that's so important to understand. I mean, I remember you talking to Trevor Booker from the 76ers on your podcast, and you were talking, and he said it straight out. He was like, listen, God forbid something happens to me. I need to have these other ventures to sort of support this business. Otherwise, or support me and my family. And I think that's so important to understand. And the reason why I asked you that is because I want the listeners and viewers to really get 7 or 8 layers deep with your audience and ask them these deeper questions. I think a lot of times people are so afraid to ask the questions, they leave the conversation fluffy, or they leave the conversation incomplete because they just are afraid of the response of, like, for example, one of my YouTube followers, they said, I was interviewing a client because they reached out, they wanted to see if I could help them, and I was asking them some pretty deep questions, and the response from the client was, or the prospect was, who's doing the interviewing here, you or me? And she was like, that rattled my cage a little bit. I'm not going to lie. I got a little intimidated and I kind of backed off at that point. But at that single moment, I said, this client is not a good fit. And I quickly ended the conversation. So have you ever had an issue with asking tough questions? And if you did, how did you get over that? Or could you give some advice to those folks that are just a little intimidated or timid when you're working with clients that are high caliber, like pro athletes and stuff? They may feel this intimidation where they can't get to the root. So how do you help someone overcome that?
Well, I think it's just so important to do it on the front end, because the longer you leave it, the more uncomfortable it gets. It gets way more toxic if you don't get to the root of it from the beginning.
Yeah. Yeah. You're doing yourself, in my opinion, a horrible disservice, not only to you, because now the client may be looking at you going, did I hire the right person? Like, are they really going to help me here?
You want to set expectations from the beginning and make sure you guys are on the same page, rather than going. I've had these issues all the time where you go into a partnership, you go into an agreement with somebody, and then you don't spell out and write down the expectations. And then if you don't get on the phone and just head towards the conflict, it only gets worse.
Oh, I love that. I think it's a cancer if you do not handle those questions up front. And I'm trying to buy Jesse some time because he's going into a full cough attack.
It's just brutal.
Yeah, dude. So
I don't know if it's allergies, if it's the weather.
That's awesome, dude. So listen, I really respect your time. I like to keep these podcasts short. Dude, we covered a lot of ground in 30 minutes. So we do a lot of damage together. So for those folks that want to learn more about you and want to, learn from you, where can we send them?
So Instagram is definitely the platform I'm most active on. Jesse.kay11, jesse.kay11 is my Instagram handle. You can check out the podcast at trendsetterspodcast.com. And then feel free to reach out to me with anything. You can shoot me an email, Jesse, Jesse, at Viber Vyber media.com.
I was looking for that. I could not find that site. So
yeah, we're doing the whole thing over again. And I was like, it just makes more sense to take it down than leave it up with an old website.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. It makes sense. So guys, I will tell you from experience, this guy is very responsive. And if you do have any questions or comments, definitely hit him up on DM on Instagram, because he does respond. He's not one of those guys that, looks cool on his posts, but like is too cool to answer any of your questions. This dude is definitely legit, and that's why he's on the show today. So definitely go check him out. Jesse, thanks again, dude, for coming on the show and just sharing your insights and wisdom and experience, man. That's what this show's all about.
I appreciate you having me on. It was fun to do. And definitely feel free, anyone, to reach out to me. I'd love to help.
You got it. So there you have it, guys. Another podcast in the books. Don't forget to subscribe, drop some reviews. If you're watching this on YouTube, if I decide to put it up there, drop some comments if you have any questions. If you want to argue anything that we said, let us do. Bring it, dude. Like bring it in the comments. We would love to get that conversation going. So there you have it. So have an amazing day, guys. Take from this conversation what you will and just apply it. That's the only thing that I'm asking you, because you can listen to 150,000 podcasts if you want, but if you don't do shit with it, then you're just wasting your time. So do execute on what it is that we talked about today, and you will see a drastic improvement in your branding and your business. So have an amazing day, and we will catch you on the next episode real soon. Take care.